Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar from the League of American Orchestras to provide a new board member's guide to the landscape of American orchestras. My name is David Stiers. I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership Programs at the League, and I serve as liaison to the orchestra board member constituency. I also am a former employee of BoardSource, the National Center for Nonprofit Boards. And so if you have any questions about your board or board governance or services that the League can provide to your board, please do not hesitate to be in touch with me at my email, dstiers@americanorchestras.org, or my phone 646-322-4033. It's a pleasure to welcome you again to today's webinar, and it is generously funded by a grant from the Howard Gilman Foundation, as well in part by public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts, with support from the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. For a few housekeeping issues, again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. You can also find the closed captioning or live transcript option through the icon in the Zoom toolbar. Also, everyone who's registered for today's webinar will receive an email with the recording, the slide deck, and the transcript. And the tab on our website that you see the QR code for under related resources gives you a list of different features that the League has to offer on our website and resources for orchestra board members. So if you haven't checked out that related resources tab and our Noteboom Governance Center, please do so to find out more about all the benefits that we provide. And speaking of benefits, we hope that all orchestra board members are accessing a wealth of free benefits, again, on our website, americanorchestras.org, and specifically our governance resources and orchestra field research. We also have some resources that are member only on our website, which require you to be signed up and logged in through your own personal account. And if you have any questions about your account, feel free to contact me or our member at americanorchestras.org email, and we'll be able to answer those questions. And also, if you don't already receive our latest articles and news email, please sign up for Symphony at www.symphony.org. And if you go to that website, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner the sign up button. And this is free information that you and all your board members, staff, volunteers, musicians, anyone can sign up to get our e-newsletter with digests of important issues happening on a daily basis within the orchestra field, articles that we commission and write about major issues facing orchestras, such as the Climate Commission's article that was just published November 21st. And so this is updated on practically a daily basis with news briefs, and then every 2 weeks or so with a major feature story. So please take advantage of that information as well. Also want to make sure that you will find on our website a benefits sheet. This is a 2-pager that provides a quick snapshot of all the different benefits that orchestra board members receive, again, with contact information for staff and different links to materials that you can find. Again, here's the QR code to access that benefit sheet. Feel free to print it out, put it in your board manuals, share it at a board meeting, and just make sure that everyone knows that through your membership as an orchestra at the League of American Orchestras, that your orchestra board members have these benefits as well. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce our hosts for today. We have joining us for this webinar as a encore from when we first had it in February, and it was so successful, we decided to do it again here in December, and we have nearly 350 people registered this time around as well. And so it's thrilling to have both Doug Hagerman, our immediate past chair of the board of the League of American Orchestras and a former past chair of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, as well as the League's president and CEO, Simon Woods, who's also been a previous chief executive at the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Seattle Symphony, New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, and both of them have a wealth of decades in the orchestra field on both the executive side and on the governance side. And so for our agenda today, we'll start with Simon giving sort of an overview of the orchestra field. And then Doug will talk about some of the particular issues of governance in orchestras. And then Simon will tell you a little bit more about the league and again, some of the trends and issues that we're seeing. And then finally, we'll end with some Q&A. So we have about 45 minutes or so of presentation. Then we'll be happy to answer questions. And if we need to run past the top of the next hour, we certainly can do that. But I will turn it over now to Simon, and please put your questions in the Q&A. Thank you so much, Simon and Doug, for being with us today.
Thank you very much, David. It's great to see everybody. We did this, as David said, for the first time last year, and we had a fantastic response to it, and we're glad to be able to provide this service. It's something that we've been talking about for a few years, and finally last year got around to implementing. And it's just great to see so many people on this call. And we hope we're going to provide you some interesting information about what's going on in the field, a little bit of context. And Doug is going to talk about, as David said, about governance. And I'm going to start off with just a little bit of an update on what is going on around the field with some data that you might find interesting. So let's just start by just kind of grounding ourselves in who orchestras are. There are more than 2,000 professional community and youth orchestras in the US, in all 50 states and in communities of all sizes. And the reason I think this is important for us just to be reminded about is just the sheer scale of this field. And as you're talking to people in your community, it's worth being reminded that you're part of a really, really big national community of orchestras. It's a very widespread art form, and our art form particularly is one of the largest of all of the kind of so-called traditional legacy art forms, and there really are orchestras everywhere in this country. So it's a big and it's a vibrant community, and it's also a community that, as you will find out if you're a new board member, it's a community that is incredibly collaborative. People are always happy to share information. They're always happy to support you, across states and within cities. So this is your field to be a part of. So this, by the way, this information comes from a document that we produce every couple of years that we're in the middle of producing an update for right now. And it sort of just reminds us of some of the key aspects of orchestras. Orchestras are a vital part of America's musical landscape. 26,000 performances over the course of a year, of which more than a quarter are completely free. And so when we get people talking to us about how orchestras are an elitist art form, it's useful to be reminded of that. And it's also to be useful to be reminded of the impact that orchestras have in their communities in terms of employment of creative workforce and the financial health of communities. Orchestras make a tremendous contribution to every community they're in. They contribute to tourism, to residency. They contribute to obviously to restaurants and hotels. They have an immense economic footprint, and they're often, in many communities, the largest arts organization in that community. And so they're a very, very significant economic driver, as well as a driver of community health and inspiration, as we know. And that really that's the next point here. Orchestras contribute to the creative, civic, and educational vitality of communities. And when we think about how we talk about orchestras, it's so important to remember this fact, that orchestras are embedded in their community, and they're providing inspiration to young people, and they're providing inspiration to communities. Every time any of us sees an orchestra, imaged in a Hollywood movie or a TV show. The traditional stereotype is, the audience is in tuxes and, everything looks like a gala, right? And we know that that is so very far from the truth. So as you encounter those stereotypes in your community, all of you can help to remind everybody of this impact. And this last point here, charitable contributions. We have a huge broad base of donors to orchestras. So 72% of charitable gifts to orchestras from the general public were under $250. Again, a reminder of just what a reach we have. Okay, so this is just a few things to remember. Orchestras of all shapes and sizes, everything from 52-week salaried musicians to per service to entirely volunteer, classical, pop, special, and education, a vast variety of relationships with their venues. Some orchestras own them, some manage them, some lease them per concert. Very many different models there. No two orchestras are exactly the same in that regard. The AFM, the union is the union of record for most orchestras, but not all. And when you're going into smaller orchestras, you find more and more orchestras who are not where the musicians are not members of the AFM. And we have everything from the staff size with a single executive director right up to the enormous staffs of the Boston Symphony and the LA Phil, and that's also reflected here in those budget numbers. Urban, suburban, rural, all 50 states. And then the last point here is just about music directors. There are so many orchestras who have music directors who live in their community and is an employee and conducts every concert and is a fixture in the community's life. And then in the large orchestras, you have music directors who conduct less than a third of concerts and visit a few times a year. So we always want to emphasize to people a vast range of different experiences of what an orchestra actually looks like. In terms of the orchestras who are members of the League, we have about almost 500 adult orchestras and a big and very vibrant youth orchestra community. And then we have a kind of certain number of smaller constituencies, international orchestras, and many business partners who help to underwrite our business, work through their sponsorships and their presentations that they do at conferences. And then we have some individuals who are members, and most of the individuals, and some of you may be individuals, most of the individuals are members in order to get access to the jobs, to the job ads, which is something that you only get access to if you're an individual member. So some people are members through their orchestra, and then they're individual members in addition to that. This is just how we break down orchestras at the League. So the largest group are the orchestras with budgets above 20 million, and you'll hear us regularly talking about Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and so on. And this is how we organize them for discussion groups, and for a lot of the other work that happens, we think about them in this way. And the way that, let's say, Group 7 and 8 orchestras operate, and the way that Group 3, 4 orchestras, so medium-sized orchestras, operate, and the way the very large orchestras operate, of course there are commonalities, but they're very, very different kinds of business. And this is how it divides up, how many orchestras are in each category. And there's one thing here which is particularly and the reason I put this slide up for one particular reason, which is to note that the majority of orchestras in this country are the smaller orchestras. Of course, the largest orchestras are the ones we hear about, regularly, the ones who make the national press, on a regular basis: New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, LA, San Francisco, and so on. But we have to be reminded that a huge proportion of our constituency is orchestras, community-based orchestras and small orchestras, based in states, sometimes in rural areas. So that's really the kind of quick overview. And Doug, I'm going to hand it back to you now to talk a little bit about governance.
Great, thank you, Simon. So if you go to the first slide, I thought I would start, for those of you who have been on another board, I thought I'd start with how orchestra boards might be a little bit different than the experience you've had in other types of boards. We have typically three leaders, an administrative leader, a volunteer board leader, and a artistic leader or music director. And the making the three-headed leadership model work is an inherent challenge. And but we have good reasons for that leadership model, and it's served us well. But it has to be managed, and everyone has to get along, and everyone has to play nice. Number two, there are variations in reporting lines among those leaders, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Orchestras typically have musician representatives involved in governance. Yeah, they are the talent, so to speak. They're also typically employees of the organization, certainly in larger organizations. But they also are involved in the governance and serve on boards and board committees. So there'll also be some unique committees in orchestras. Some orchestras have EDI committees, community engagement committees, artistic direction committees, and the like. There is sometimes a lack of clarity. What's the role of the board as it relates to artistic matters? And those of you who got on this board thinking you could tell the orchestra that they should play Brahms instead of Tchaikovsky are probably mistaken, because that's probably not your role as a board member. But you need to be in tune with the artistic direction of the organization and supportive of it, and in some ways kind of it. But that doesn't mean any kind of detailed involvement in artistic matters. We have a model in our field. There are many orchestras that have structural deficits and that depend on heroic philanthropy, big one-time gifts, and the like. If we could change one thing about our field, it would be to properly capitalize it. So we struggle with sometimes weak balance sheets, even where we're operating in the black. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is an imperative for our field. The field has an image problem about who orchestral music is quote unquote for. And as organizations that want to serve our whole communities and optimize our appeal for leaders in our communities and donors and so forth who want us to support the whole community, it's really critical that we be working how to maximize the reach of our organizations within our communities, and that's the thrust of our EDI work. And again, we do fight elitism. We have unique processes typically tied up in collective bargaining agreements about how leaders are chosen. This is not the corporate world in terms of how that all happens. And so if you're new board members, you probably don't need to worry about that your first year. But someday you should be really get your head around the leadership selection processes and succession planning processes in your orchestra. And finally, this is probably obvious. We need to have constructive relationships with musicians as it relates to leadership, because they are a critical constituency for the success of the organization for obvious reasons. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So I typically talk. Oops, wrong way. Yeah. So we referred to constituencies, but I thought I'd just kind of list them a little bit here. And if you're involved in governance of the organization, one way to define governance is kind of the set of rules and norms and expectations and laws and principles that relate to the interrelations between constituencies. Who decides things and who gets consulted about things and so forth. And all those constituencies are important. If you're a leader of your organization, you need to worry about all those constituencies and whether they're engaged and whether they're optimally contributing to the organization. Now, when you were elected to your orchestra board, you were elected under a set of rules that come from two sources: the statutes in the state in which your orchestra is organized, and the bylaws of your organization. Those are where most of our governance rules come from. So as you pursue the governance of your organization, you need to be mindful of the requirements of those two sources. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So I like to review with people a little bit more about the orchestra leadership model. So in most situations, the CEO reports to the board/board chair and is hired and fired pursuant to procedures that can be defined by the board, but also typically are shaped by the collective bargaining agreement. When I did a CEO search at my musicians involved in it, I think that's the norm. The music director reporting relationship can be different. Sometimes the music director reports to the board chair, sometimes to the CEO. There are reasonable minds can disagree about this. I'm someone who advocates having the music director report to the CEO, but both models can work. And it's safe to say that the older your music director is and the more European your music director is, the more he or she will expect to report to the board chair. So that's an issue to be managed. As I said before, the board chair, while these reporting relationships ultimately feed up to the board chair does not have sole power over these leadership decisions. It's a shared decision with other board members, staff, musicians, and so forth. And having collaborative relationships where everyone knows what their role is and everyone supports each other, acts as thought partners together in solving problems, the better this is all going to work. You might ask whether everyone has a job description in your organization. Sometimes the music director job descriptions are non-existent or pretty thin. And it raises the question, is the music director responsible for anything other than great concerts? Is the music director responsible for the whole mission of the organization? So that's the kind of thing you get at in fleshing out a job description. And finally, I just want to emphasize that the board should represent the community in its dealings with the other constituencies. Take an external vantage point. Put your community hat on when you walk into board meetings, not your whatever your latest issue is that you've been working with in the organization. See this organization from the perspective of the community. Okay, next slide. So this is what I call the stay in your lane slide. Particularly the bottom half of this slide, the board doesn't run the organization. It doesn't execute plans. It doesn't hire and fire people. It doesn't, make the spending decisions that cause the budget to be balanced or not. But the board does set the budget, and the board does set the policies, and the board does oversee all of this and has responsibility for seeing the big picture, approving strategies, and asking strategic questions. There are two failure modes here, really. I have to emphasize this. There are some boards that are too hands-off, and there are some boards that are too hands-on. And this is a matter of getting it just right. You want to be active in your oversight and active in your support, but not active in telling people what to do or how to do their jobs, because you have professionals who are hired for that. And just to touch lightly on the top half of the slide, my favorite way of thinking about the board's role is that you're really taking community investment and translating it into public value, because we all have a big investment of philanthropic dollars from our community, and it needs to be translated into value for the whole community in a public sense. Okay, next slide. So think about what are your responsibilities as a board member. And I have two slides on this. The first is the set of collective responsibilities that the board has as a whole. And I think it's important for us to get our head around this, right? So we shape the vision and mission. We set strategy and make sure that planning is happening the way it should. We select the CEO and the music director and support them and evaluate them. We monitor how the organization's performing. We ensure that resources are adequate through networking and fundraising and other means of support. We protect assets and do kind of our fiduciary responsibility as it relates to financial oversights and legal and ethical integrity. We build our board and bring new people into the fold to be future board members, and we try to enhance the board's public standing. So these are all things that your board should be doing collectively and that every board member shares in responsibility for. The next slide is the individual responsibilities of board members. And I hope that in most cases, before you signed on to join your orchestra's board, someone reviewed with you what your responsibilities were. It might have been written, it might have been verbal. Hopefully it was discussed, because it's very important that we all sign up for these significant responsibilities. Being on an orchestra board isn't a lightweight duty. It isn't something you can do every now and then. It's a serious responsibility. And so we all have to do all the things listed on here. Whether that's fundraising in whatever way is appropriate for you, making a personal gift, attending, keeping up to date about how the organization's doing financially, and so on. You can see it all listed on the slide. We don't need to talk about each one, but I hope all of you will accept your responsibility to do all of these things as orchestra board members. And if there's not clarity within your organization on this, you might bring that up with your board chair. Say, hey, maybe we ought to get this clarified, because I didn't know what I signed up for here. Or some people think they have responsibilities and others don't. So it can be a fruitful topic, and make sure everyone's on the same page of what we're contributing to the organization. Okay, next slide. We're getting toward the end here, but I want to talk about how we build a board. You're all hopefully going to have the opportunity to suggest people to the nominating and governance committee of your organization. Hopefully you will look beyond your existing network. Hopefully your orchestra is reaching through various networks, whether it's neighborhood, government, corporate community, et cetera, to find new people who aren't already in the in crowd in the symphony to go on the board. But everyone we recruit, of course, needs to have a passion for this music, needs to be familiar with how to do nonprofit governance, needs to be willing to support the organization in various ways. And from time to time, we're looking for specific skills. We might need a technology person or a finance person or whatever the case may be. And so we have self-perpetuating boards, but part of our job is to always be looking for new names. And just a footnote on that, you don't have to vet a candidate before you bring them forward to your governance committee. One of the ways that things go wrong is when people say, oh, I've got an idea, and they go and ask the person if they want to be on the board before they've discussed that with the governance committee. You want to go to the governance committee before you ask any questions like that of the potential recruit. Okay, next slide. So the sort of the last conceptual thing that I want to talk about on governance is this notion of how the board operates in different modes. At any given board meeting, hopefully you will find your board operating in each of these three modes at some point in the meeting. So the fiduciary stuff tends to be what we think of as regular business, financial updates, audit reports, and the like, election of new members, following the rules and the bylaws for everything we do. If that work overwhelms the time that people spend board meetings, then you probably have the balance wrong, because you need to make time for strategic and generative work. Strategic is, of course, planning. It's talking about the future, setting priorities, dedicating resources to specific things. And generative is really blue sky thinking. How do we respond to the trends and challenges that we face? What's coming around the corner at us that we need to anticipate and get ready for? That could be relatively common questions like, is our audience aging, right? Which is a age-old question. People said the orchestra audiences were aging 40 years ago, and they're still aging. But here we are, and we're still going strong. But in any event, thinking about those big issues of how we serve our community and what our purpose is, are generative. And if your board leaders can find a way to make time for strategic and generative topics at every board meeting, that's for the best. Okay, next slide. So the last thing I want to cover before I hand it over to Simon is, we're in a point in time where the whole concept of equity, diversity, and inclusion is being challenged. It's being caricatured. It's being portrayed as an obstacle of the meritocracy and all sorts of other things. But there are really, really good reasons why a proper equity, diversity, and inclusion work is important for orchestras. And here are some of the reasons that the League has focused on in kind of trying to help orchestras discuss this and make the case for why we're doing this in an era when some people just, think there's something wrong with equity, diversity, and inclusion. But here's why we're doing it. In the end, we're an art form. It enriches our musical performance to have all voices heard in the concert hall. The long-term sustainability of our orchestras depend upon us reaching and being valued by the entire community. It's crucial that we have access to the best talent, and that no superstar violinist, oboist, or trumpet player drops off the pipeline because they didn't get a shot. Everyone should have a shot. It's central to our creativity, our sense of innovation and collaboration. And finally, because our communities are diverse, it's important that our most important musical organizations also be diverse. So this is how we articulate the case for this. We don't intend to have a debate about that today, but we thought it would be useful for you to hear why this is a part of what we're moving forward with. And with that, back to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Doug. So what we're going to do now is go on to a question that always concerns boards, which is what's going on in the field. And I'm going to speak in a minute about the work that the League does in terms of supporting boards and supporting orchestras. But this is the way that we share data and we monitor trends is a very, very important part of our kind of value we provide to the field. So I'm just going to take you through a few kind of different aspects of that in the next few slides. And this is fairly hot off the press. A lot of this data comes from a project that we have with TRG, which is a major arts consultancy. and it's based on a benchmark group. So we have about 55 orchestras at last count in this benchmark group, who supply us data directly through their sales and their customer relationship management systems. So it's very bona fide data. Excuse me, it's very bona fide data. But the thing I always say about it is it's not a total field picture. It is guidance only. We have other ways of getting at bigger trends in the field, which comes from our big report that we do every year called the Orchestra Statistical Report, which if you don't know about that yet, you will hear about that in due course. But this is based on a benchmark group. In other words, it doesn't reflect the totality of the picture. But it's a guidance document, and I would always emphasize every orchestra will have its own experience. So let's start on what the benchmark group is telling us about orchestra audiences. And there is some good news here, but the headline news is that orchestras are still really doing fairly well relative to the other major performing arts. Ticket sales are up since 22-23, which was the kind of the moment, the snapshot moment that we've taken right after the pandemic, and revenues up 23%. Now, when I talk about the overall finances, of course, you'll remember that is in the context of significant inflation in this period. So it's not quite as good news as it appears, but nonetheless, it's by no means a sky is falling situation. So if people tell you, well, orchestra sales are falling, well, our benchmark group doesn't really tell us that right now. If you take a look at a longer period of time, let's say 20 years, then it's a different picture. But right now, post-pandemic, it's fairly encouraging. There's a lot of new ticket buyers in the mix here. So total number of customer households growing between 22, 23, and 24, 25. A lot of that actually is due to, I will say, kind of special concerts. A lot of movies with orchestra, a lot of special pops concerts with big name guests, and orchestras really diversifying their product range. So I think the caveat sort of buried in that thing about new ticket buyers is that it may not necessarily be true to say that there are a lot of new ticket buyers coming to pure classical. We know that orchestras in general are generating new audiences, but the question about pure classical is a slightly different one, which is why orchestras are kind of thinking about the balance in different ways to match their communities. Single ticket sales are continuing to grow this season, which I think also reflects the kind of diversification of the product lines that I mentioned. But the really interesting thing here is that subscription and membership sales strengthened during the same period, with volume increasing 4%, revenue rising 11%. And again, this is one of those things that we hear a lot, which is that subscriptions are dead. Well, they're not really. They are continuing to hold their own. And not only that, but there is a new trend going on right now within orchestras, which some of your orchestras may already be on top of and may be working, which is this idea of memberships. So the membership model is the idea that a member of the public can pay. Pick a number, $50 a month, and for that they get the opportunity to go to a certain number of performances in that month. And the great thing about this is it's a 12-month renewal, so it's like your Netflix subscription, it's like your Apple subscription or whatever you have. So once you lock in people and you lock them into automatic repeating membership, you can keep them. This is a big trend. It's currently more, I would say, in smaller and medium-sized orchestras than it is in large ones, but it's definitely a growth area. So let's look at this picture then. Let's say it's by no means all bad news. In fact, there's some quite encouraging information in here, although we know that there are some challenges in particular communities, but there's some encouraging stuff there. As we look at fundraising, there's a slightly more concern here, I would say. Yes, there is a broadening base of support. Orchestras are getting more gifts of us at a smaller level, at a smaller dollar level from more people. This is a great indication of the breadth of the base. But they are losing major gifts. They're losing gifts at the high end, and they are losing. There is particularly this very significant exposure with all orchestras of every level being very reliant on large gifts, large gifts at a small number of large gifts, which is a lot of exposure. And as those donors are either passing away or not coming to concerts anymore, there's risk there. And right now, the upward trend in individual giving is not being compensated for by the loss of the high-end donors. So something we've really got to pay attention to. And when we think of what does this tell us, kind of big picture, it tells us that the messaging to our communities about our community value, the messaging about the impact that orchestras have on young people, on communities, on civic financial health, those factors, those broader factors beyond the music are continuing to be an absolutely vital messaging point for orchestras to continue to broaden the fundraising base. This is a snapshot of finances, and you'll get the slides after, and I'm not going to go down this because I think it's fairly self-explanatory. But as you look at your own orchestra's financials, you can look back at this slide and compare yourselves to the benchmark group, and people always look at liquidity. Actually, 26 weeks, 6 months of liquidity, average weeks of expense and liquidity across the whole sector. It's actually not as bad as one might expect, but given that we know we have challenges in the business model and we know we have capitalization problems. But most orchestras do appear to have 6 months of liquidity. So you can peruse that at your leisure. Doug was talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and again, this is another slide that I'm not going to go down in detail, but I will just point out here that our field has significantly changed over the last decade. It has become significantly more diverse. It has become significantly, and that applies both in gender, particularly in terms of whose music is being played and who is standing on a podium. And there is a slow increase in board diversity. But the thing for us to note about is that orchestra boards are still less diverse than non-profit organizations in general, and women are still underrepresented. This is a very, very important point because it just goes to remind us, just like Doug said a few minutes ago, that thinking intentionally about community representation. If you want to attract donations from your community, you have to represent the community. And this is just a reminder that we're making progress, but we've still got a long way to go there. Again, I'll leave you to look at that at your leisure. So here are the big themes in the field that are being discussed right now. We try to reflect these themes all the time. They're reflected in our strategic plan. Actually, we're just working on a renewal of that for the period 26 through 29 right now. And most of these themes will show up. Relevance, the R word, is so important, and it drives everything. The breadth of audiences, demographics, building community connections. It's so incredibly central, and just about every orchestra in every size community is thinking about it. And of course, in a sense, as everybody who's come from the corporate world knows, you can't divorce marketing from product development. And so this idea of what are we putting on our stages, how are we being creative about rethinking programming, is absolutely critical in terms of creating relevance. Financial and organizational sustainability, I think everybody realizes the importance of that. And then this other theme that has really become clear in the last few years, organizational culture and alignment. Orchestras are complicated ecologies. They're complicated ecologies with different stakeholders of musicians and music directors and board members and staff. And we often see a somewhat different perspective from each of those constituencies on what success looks like. And so you know, that just go to show that this notion of sort of collaborative culture is absolutely vital to us, you know, as we think about how to make our organization successful for the long term. Youth development hardly needs adding. Equity, diversity, inclusion, we've touched on. This endless topic, tension between past and future, tradition and adaptation, it applies in so many of these areas above. It's a topic that we will talk about on a daily basis. And then lastly, this whole notion of leadership development. Our field still needs to be more and more effective in how it develops the leaders of the next generation. So let's just now come to tell you a little bit about how the League's work fits into this. And I'm going to go through this fairly swiftly. And what I'd like to invite you to do as I go through this next kind of 5 minutes is to think about what questions you would like to ask. We're going to have, you know, we're going to have 5 to 10 minutes at the end of this in which Doug and I can attempt to ask any burning questions you want. So if you have questions, now is the moment to think about them and put them in the chat while I go through this next section. Okay, a little bit about the League. The League was founded in the 1940s, first national conference occurring that same year. We've done a conference every year since then. We have a long history as an organization. It was originally founded in DC, but then it moved to New York and it was rebranded as the League of American Orchestras. It initially started as, you saw here, as the American Symphony Orchestra League. We have 26 staff. Plus contractors. We're based in New York, but actually only about a half of us are in New York. I'm based in suburban New York, and our office is in New York. But we have staff now in Boston, Rochester, Detroit, Chicago, Grand Rapids, Milwaukee. We have staff where our orchestras are. So we not only you know, we have a national reach with our people. And our budget's around $7 million, and we get our income roughly equally between membership dues that orchestra pays, our earned revenue from our professional development programs and conference, and fundraised. And you know, our biggest and most important constituency on fundraising actually is people like you. It is board members of American orchestras, people who care deeply about the music and the field. And care to support the work of supporting the whole field beyond their own organizations. This is our vision and mission. And I would just point out here, you know, we say in the mission to champion the vitality of music and the orchestral experience, support the orchestra community, and lead change boldly. What does that tell you? It tells us that that we're both a membership organization, but we're also very much a leadership organization, trying to do the right thing to help advance change so that orchestras can be successful in the future. And that kind of duality in our mission is a really important part of who we are. The League board is your representatives to the League. We have many board members on our fairly large national board, and really, I think it's true to say that the board is our kind of eyes and ears out in the profession. The combination of the many board members who are on our board, but also the field representation, our ex officio members who represent all the different CEO groups and youth orchestras and the volunteer council. These people come together 4 times a year to help us do the best work to support orchestras. I'm not going to go down this, but here are major programs in person, conferences, the Midwinter CEOs Conference, seminars, webinars, our professional development programs. And, you know, we know from when we survey our members that convening and coming together both in person and virtually is one of the things that members most want. So a lot of these in-person programs, which, you know, were on a brief hiatus during the pandemic, but are now back in force, are really at the core of who we are. But then we also have a huge amount of content which we produce, which is published, and we have a governance center full of resources for you, which David's already shown the link for that, I think, and I'll show you how to find this information in a second. And then we have many other reports which come out, many of them every year, some of them every few years, all of which are available for you to access. But one of the most important things we do, and we could talk all afternoon about this because it is so incredibly important, is we have two people in Washington, D.C., Heather Noonan and Nejan Lee. And they, between them, have more than 50 years experience of advocating in Washington, D.C. for orchestras. And in fact, the depth of their experience is such that they don't really only represent orchestras. We play a convening role in all the performing arts and world, and we help to bring the performing arts advocacy and folks and CEOs together regularly to make sure that we are telling our story in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And there's a lot of very important work that goes on there. And as we're talking about Washington, D.C., this is just a nice little map that reminds us that we reach 100% of the Senate and 70% of the House of Representatives. So we don't lobby in states. We only lobby nationally, but we rely on partnership with orchestras to get the message across. And the reach we have with orchestras is absolutely enormous when we want to bring influence to bear on a particular issue. Doug alluded to this earlier, but obviously this year has been a complicated year, not only in the area of equity, diversity, inclusion, but in many areas. This is my moment to sort of say out loud, we are absolutely, I would say, religiously non-partisan organization. We do have a platform of issues that we believe in, but we are absolutely non-partisan, and we have many decades of success in DC, which come from our consistency in being non-partisan. So how did we respond to a very complicated year? We responded to it by providing resources to help orchestras navigate this changing landscape, and this is just an example of how we address that. And again, this is a whole web page that you can look at it when you have a moment. And lastly, before we just answer a couple of questions, I'm just going to remind you to go to the website. And on the website, there is one particular area that you might want to look at. Two areas, actually. The first is there's a search function. And I will tell you that in a few months, we're just working right now on a chatbot, which is going to appear on the website. And the chatbot is going to be a huge help because it is going to, it's obviously going to be AI based, and it's going to help people find the information that they want, because the website is incredibly dense. There is a vast amount of information on the website, and it can sometimes be hard to navigate. So that's an enhancement that's coming after the holidays, actually, sometime in early 2026. But in the meantime, also, it's worth going to the Learn section. And as you pull down that drop-down menu, this is what you see. And I would just draw your attention to this topic list on the right-hand side here, because you can find so much information here on the website about just about any topic that you want to find out about. This is your starting place. And if you don't find what you're looking for, please reach out to us and let us know, and we can point you to some great resources. So I think that is the end of the slides. So I'm going to stop the slides at this point, Doug. And David,
so
I'm going to come back.
We have some questions.
Yes. So the first, go ahead, Doug, if you've seen the questions.
I've got them here. All right, so the first question is a direct question about something I said, so I'll answer that. What's the rationale for why one shouldn't speak with a potential board member before taking them to governance committee? It's really twofold. One is that you don't know yet whether your governance committee is going to want that particular person, and so you potentially are in the embarrassing situation of having to walk back what looked like an invitation. But the second reason is you give that person a chance to say no before anyone's even had a chance to cultivate them. So the right way to do this is to maybe cultivate their interest in the symphony. Like, there's no reason saying, "Hey, would you join me for a concert?" or let me tell you what's going on. But in terms of actually talking to them about board service, you really should go through a governance committee first. Okay, so our next question, I think, I don't know who wants to take this one. The question is about group 8 orchestras where we talked about every board member should make a personally significant gift. Some of the board members are musicians. They probably don't particularly want to do that. How should we navigate that issue? I think that there are situations where this becomes a lighter touch. And if you got someone who's a volunteer musician and has also stepped up to be a board member, you don't have to lean on them hard for a contribution. On the other hand, it's nice if every board member is a contributor. When you can look your other donors in the eye and say, our board is contributing. And so I think it's best if you try and do something with every board member, even if everyone realizes it's not going to be a large amount of money.
Doug, can I take this question about what would be the next staff position to add? Because I think that's kind of an interesting question.
Sure.
It's what would be the next staff position to add once we have a full-time ED, part-time personnel coordinator, and part-time admin assistant. And, I was just thinking about that. I was thinking about how I would answer that as you were just talking about the last question. And my answer to that is, I think it depends on the strength of your executive director. If your executive director is a very artistic person, but is perhaps less familiar with writing grants and raising money, you might want to hire a grant writer, or you might want to hire a part-time, giving director, or somebody to do both. If your executive director is a great fundraiser, but doesn't come so much from an artistic background, and we do see that sometimes in smaller orchestras, then maybe you want to hire an artistic person, the part-time artistic planner, to help work with the music director and put great seasons together. So, I think it can be, you can go in any number of different directions to that. And I don't think there's a one size fits all to that question, but it's a great question, actually.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Joe Lanus's question in the Q&A. He asks for both of us, are there one or two key topics that every boardroom should be touching on at every meeting? And I think the answer to that is no, Joe. Certainly as it relates to those strategic and generative topics, I think you need to have like a vision for over the course of 12 or 24 months, we're going to make sure we cover the following things, but you don't need to cover all of them at every board meeting. So one board meeting might be focused on long-term financial planning. Another board meeting might be focused on community partnerships. Another board meeting might be focused on youth participation. So I think the answer is no. On the other hand, I do think that most board meetings are going to have some sort of finance report and some sort of key updates from your CEO or executive director. I'll say on the subject of finance reports, I'm a real stickler for not putting up large pages of numbers because boards never follow that. So if someone's putting a chart up on a PowerPoint at a board meeting and there's more than say 15 or 20 numbers on it, it's generally going to be worthless. So think about how you do your finance reports so that people actually understand them. Anything to add to that, Simon?
No, I think that's great. I mean, the broader question, of course, is what are the topics that boards don't talk about in general, but should be raised up? And one of the things that Doug's referred to earlier is this whole notion of community representation. And the question I always that I think boards should generally probably do a slightly better job of asking than they often do is ask whose voices are not included. Who is not included in the board discussion? Who needs to be included? Whether that is different communities within your community or different demographics or young people. I think that's a great That's a great thing to ask. Um, can I
So
just do a real quick one? Linda Stevens asked, single tickets and subscriptions revenue grew at a higher percentage than ticket subscriptions sold. Was this due to an increase in prices? I don't know the answer to that, but yes, I assume absolutely that is to do with price increases. And of course, many orchestras have used inflation as a pretext, justifiable pretext, to increase prices.
okay. Let's go back up to the one above that. And Simon, I know at some point you need to leave to catch a plane, so
Yeah, I will
don't
hop
stay
off
if
in a minute, but I'll let
you'll
you.
pop. But we're going to keep going until we get through all these.
Okay.
So one person said some of this is contradictory. For example, diversifying board membership might mean folks give something other than money. Asking them to make a significant monetary donation might not work. Um, the I think my response to that is yes, I agree. And this notion of how much people give in conjunction with their board service is a controversial one, because some orchestras have worked very hard to increase the board giving by setting minimum contribution levels. On the other hand, we all need to recognize that there are people in our communities who can contribute things to our board dynamic other than money. And we need to think about how we can include them without discouraging anyone else who's got a fat checkbook, and get that right balance and make sure everyone understands what everyone else is contributing. So yes with that.
Can I just do a quick one before I hop off, Doug? Arthur's question about how does the League define orchestras? Does it include small experimental ensembles? The answer to that is, every kind of thing, everybody who defines themselves as an orchestra is welcome in our family, right? Some smaller orchestras, organizations find a tremendous amount of value through what we do. Some are so different in their business models and the way they approach the world that much of what we talk about is not that relevant. So it's a mixture. But we definitely have some small organizations who are very, very creative in our league and orchestra family.
Okay, Voces 8 from the UK. I'm not familiar with their youth development program, but the sentiment behind this question, of course, is an important one. We at the League have identified that young people being exposed to orchestral music, whether that's classical music or something else, but is a critical challenge for our field. And so developing all the pathways in which youth can participate and have exposure to orchestral music is really important. I don't think we can compete with pop culture in terms of the attention of young people, and I'm not sure we want to try. But on the other hand, we got to give them a chance to be exposed to this, because so that when someone offers to put an instrument in their hands or invites them to sing in a choir or whatever the case might be, they might think about saying yes to that. So that is a very important challenge for our field. Just to give youth everything from talented young kids who are already playing an instrument and giving them a chance to hone their craft, to other kids who probably haven't ever had a chance to pick up an instrument and just want a chance to play something in the band. We got to give all those kids a chance. So that's my point of view on that one. Okay. Let's see. What do you think of the idea of behind the scenes sponsorships where board members can sponsor other board members, basically giving on their behalf? Oh gosh. It's a nice idea. I think it's a little dangerous. I would rather see person A give a lot of money and person B give $5 than have person A give $10,000 for person B. I guess that's my off the cuff response to that question, so that no one feels like they're valued or that someone bought someone else or something like that. I sort of cringe at that idea. but we don't want to discourage the person who's generous, nor do we want to discourage the person who's got something to contribute but doesn't have a lot of money. That's how I'd say it. Yes, we talked about bringing youth into concert halls. We have to go online. Well, yeah, a lot of orchestras have tried to have a social media presence. It's not easy. It takes resources. It takes consistency. There have been a lot of orchestras that have started with YouTube channels and podcasts and the like, but haven't kept it up. It's a challenge for our field. It's the kind of thing that tends to get cut when budgets are tight. So, but yeah, of course, Garen, I totally agree with the sentiment. Okay, let's see. Deborah Bronstein, staying in your lane. Yes. Okay. Do you have materials we can reference for those clarifying? Okay. Well, I mean, feel free to use that slide that I put up about staying in your lane and to, you know, to point out to the person that, you know, we've hired professionals based on their expertise. You're not on the board to second guess those individuals. We at best we provide oversight and high level direction. We don't tell people what to do. I think every board chair at some point has to have a conversation with someone who's gotten too in the weeds and who's gotten too prescriptive with staff, and just to say, look, understand what you're doing to that staff member. You're crushing their productivity. If every time you have an idea about a program or a donor or whatever it might be, you send an email and you want a response right away, you create a do loop for that staff member that takes them away from the core of their job. And that's not why you're on the board, to distract the staff. You're on the board to empower the staff, not to distract them. So I think there's a conversation that needs to be had. I do have, in terms of material about Deborah, the closest I have to something like that is a very wise board chair and a very wise CEO in our field at one point in time created a document about how they were going to support each other. So the board chair says to the CEO, "You can count on the following from me. Like I'm never going to embarrass you in public. I'm not going to blindside you. I'm not going to micromanage you, you know, et cetera, like all the different things." And then the CEO said, "Here's the way I'm going to support you as the board chair. I'm going to keep you informed. You're going to learn about things from me, not from someone else, et cetera, on and on and on. We're gonna plan board meetings together, et cetera." So you can go into a little bit more of those concepts about how staffs and boards interact, using kind of a set of clarified expectations like that. As I said before, job descriptions help a lot. If something's in the job description of the music director, and to lead, for example, the artistic vision of the organization, well, then that makes it fairly easy to go to a board member and say, "Hey, this is the music director's job," right? And so I think some of those clarifying documents, some of those job descriptions, some of those, even just having the conversation. I mean, I have to tell you that before I got elected to the board, to my first orchestra board, I thought that board members decided what pieces were going to be played at concerts. I mean, well, it took me about 6 minutes to realize that wasn't right, but that's what I thought before I entered my first board meeting. So sometimes it's just a matter of clarifying this for people. They may just not know. So we got through all the questions in the Q&A. Do we have any in the chat, David, that I need to look at?
No, I think we got through all of those as well.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Doug, and thank you, Simon and Absentia, for all your great wisdom. And again, we will be sharing the PowerPoint slides, video, and transcript. And we, again, hope that when you depart, you'll fill out the evaluation form, which helped influence our content for today. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you'll consider also joining us in Baltimore for our national conference, June 1st through 3rd. We'll be having some special programming with an orchestra board forum during the conference. We will also be unveiling a new version of this handbook. Some of you may have the Effective Orchestra Guide, this blue book on your desk. There will be it's about a decade years old. It's will be a new edition coming out this spring and unveiled at the conference. So looking forward to those events coming up. And also our next webinar will be on Wednesday, January the 21st on social media to help with marketing and audience development. But again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to be in touch with me. January 8th is the deadline to register for conference to get our lowest rate. And so that Destination Baltimore is available for members on our website right now. So let us know if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing many of you in 2026 and hope you have a great rest of 2025.
So, David, just before you cut off, there were a couple of people who wanted to speak with me offline about things. Go ahead and include my email in when you circulate the replay.
Okay.
If anyone wants to follow up with anything, I'm here for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year.